I love the fact that you are both an MD and an intuitive. And I'm wondering, how do you use both in your practice of medicine with patients?
It's my great honor to be able to integrate my scientific knowledge and my 14 years of medical training at UCLA, at USC, at the Veterans Administration, all that linear, wonderful training with my intuition. And it's so natural. Intuitive healing is so naturally combined with science. So what I do is that when a patient comes in, and I still see private patients, they come in, they tell me why they're there, and I listen with my linear mind, and they'll say, oh, I have problems with my boyfriend, I'm having problems with my health, I'm feeling depressed, whatever they think they're there for. And I'll listen. And then I'll also be tuning in to any images, impressions, sights, smells, sounds, knowings, body energies, flashes that I pick up as they're talking. So there are two streams of information coming in. One is more linear and one is more intuitive and instinctive. And I combine all of that together to help the person.
Wow. I wish every doctor was able to do that. It would make life so much easier, wouldn't it?
It would. And I'm training healthcare practitioners. I give workshops on and trainings for healthcare practitioners. So little by little, more and more people are, opening up to having the skill set to do this. It's a skill set that's learned. Mm-hmm. So it isn't just a supernatural power. It's a skill set that's learned. Though some people might be more talented than others or have an innate talent for it. Some children are just born intuitive. Others have to work a little harder to develop it, but everyone can develop their intuition. If you're listening and you feel really out of touch with your intuition, you can just restart now by just getting quiet, tuning in, and finding that inner voice. Because it doesn't matter how far you've gone from it or how fast your mind is going or how overwhelmed you feel. You can always start again over and over. And I've done that. I do that all the time. If I'm off, if I feel out of touch, I'll stop, hopefully sooner rather than later. I'll stop, start over again to tune in. Always close your eyes, go inward, take a breath, let the mind go by like a ticker tape and refocus on the breath and begin to expand myself beyond my linear mind to something larger. That's the basic intuitive exercise that you must do to shift out of the mind into a more spacious arena where you can hear intuition come in. So it's that conscious shift from small self to large self is an important part of awakening intuition.
Yeah, that makes so much sense nowadays. Now, I'm familiar with your story. Your parents were both doctors, and they were not really very thrilled with you expressing your intuition. How did you get beyond that to feel confident that you were right in following the path that you followed?
In my first book, Second Sight, I write about my personal journey in integrating intuition in medicine. And as a child, I had 25 physicians in my family. Both my parents were physicians. And I grew up all around doctors. That was just my culture that I grew up in. And I was a little girl that was an empath who would sense things, know things, feel energy, often feel overwhelmed by it. I would have dreams. I'm a dream empath. I have dreams that come true. And finally, my mother at age 9 or maybe 10 said to me, never mention another one of your intuitions at home again. So I was forbidden to express it, and that's a horrible, horrible feeling for a child, who has these gifts and who needs to express. It's like a waterfall. It has to keep flowing. It has to keep getting developed and expressing itself, just like a flower growing. But I put a stop to it. And in my early life, I got very heavily involved with drugs to try and squash that part of myself because I did not want to express it. I didn't want to be considered weird. I didn't want my mother to look at me with that horrible, exasperated look like there was something wrong with me. It just was all wrong. So I wanted to run from it. And I did run from it for a little while. And then destiny brought me back, by my parents sent me to this wonderful psychiatrist who was my mentor, throughout my life, from that early point until he passed on. And he helped me see that in order to be whole, I had to integrate my intuitions into my being. There's no way I would be happy or comfortable in my own skin unless I did that. And so when you even have one person who believes in that and who you really resonate with, they can help you. I've been that guide to people. You could find other guides who can be just that person who said, you must, Lisa, you must integrate this part of yourself in order to be whole. And there's no way around it. And it's a beautiful thing. So he was the first person who ever said that. And I go, oh my God, really? As a child, I felt like a weight was lifted because I wanted to be me, but I was so squashed. I was so repressed. I was so careful because I didn't want to rock the boat. I was an only child, so I didn't have brothers or sisters to take the attention away from me. So the attention was on me. And I just didn't want to upset my parents like that. It's just a horrible feeling. But it's very common for intuitive children to go through this. That's why I like telling my story, because it's our job to really support these beautiful, precious, empath, intuitive beings and help them to embrace their gifts, to develop it as they grow older and go through different phases and use them for the good.
Absolutely. I thank you for sharing that story because first of all, it's a very powerful story, but it's also, I think, really important for people to hear that if you're squashing your abilities, you're really not living up to your full potential. And I don't mean to sound pat about that, but I'm wondering if you had not worked with this wonderful therapist and opened up your abilities, in your experience, what happens to the body when you suppress who you really are, whether it's intuitive or not? How does that create illness?
Well, for me, my body, as an empath, my body is so sensitive and I depend on my body so much for everything in terms of its eyes and its ears. My body is always listening to energy. All right. And I've been that way since I've been a child, for better or for worse. So what happened to me when I was repressing, I got very anxious. I got very self-conscious. I got very uncomfortable. I would have solar plexus issues, as a young. But, I was running and taking drugs. So that self-medicated a lot of it. But you can have, it's like squashing your compassion or squashing your joy, let's say, asking you to go through life without expressing your joy. What effect would that have on you? You could only imagine. It would be, you are multicolored. You have many gifts. You have many forms of expression that are just waiting to come out and to help you nurture your body, help others, help the world. It's just the way we're made. And so you want to do everything possible to encourage all this to come out. You don't want to squash, repress, or go on empathic overload. In the Empath Survival Guide, I give you tools, strategies, how to deal with overload and try to avoid it in terms of setting boundaries, centering yourself, tuning into your intuition, going out in nature, going into baths, into water, quieting oneself down. There's a whole program of what you do to incorporate your intuition, to nurture your intuition. It's like a flower. You want to water it and do the kinds of things that your intuition loves and responds to. But it means you need to take a little bit of responsibility here for doing the watering. If you like me, I didn't have anybody. That's not the ideal circumstance, But even if you have one person who says, wow, that's really an interesting dream you shared with me. That's creative. That's fascinating. To get that kind of feedback as opposed to, who do you think you are expressing that? What is that supposed to mean? You can get awfully negative responses, especially, as time back, when I was growing up, people just didn't know what to make of it. Mm-hmm. And, my story was a little complicated because my mother turned out to be a psychic. And I came from a whole lineage of psychic healers, my grandmother, my mother, and my grandmother, I found out, because I was brought up in California, not Philadelphia, where they were, was a flamboyant psychic an herbalist in her neighborhood in Philadelphia. And my mother became very ashamed of that. She was more mainstream. She felt her neighbors laughed at my grandmother. And so my mother had the same abilities, but never told anyone. And she went into the mainstream medical community, not wanting to be considered weird. She wanted to, her biggest desire in life was to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
I've never met a woman with stronger desire to fit in. And I didn't fit in. And so you could see our tension that was developed. She wanted to squish me into fitting in. And I naturally didn't fit in, which is fine, which is great. It's me. I'm the outsider. I'm the one who goes the path less traveled. I've always have been. But she was like, fit in, fit in. I'm like, no. So you can imagine that tension growing up. So on her deathbed, she informed me that I came from a whole lineage of intuitive healers. And she never wanted to tell me that because she didn't want to encourage me to develop my intuition. Bless her heart. I mean, this woman loved me so much. I can't tell you how much she loved me, but she was so bent on me not expressing this until the last moment. And I said, why are you telling me now? And she said, I want to pass the power along to you. I mean, that's really what she said. I'm thinking, you must be kidding. I'm like, after all this time, but anyways, that's my story. That's her story. and that's how it was. It is. And it's all perfect.
That's really an amazing story. She thought she was helping you. She was doing what she thought was the most loving thing a mother can do. But in the meantime, she, bless her heart, put you through hell. But I mean, people who are interested in this kind of thing know that the wounded healer is sometimes the best healer. Thanks for listening. Check out Castle Gate, a novel based on my own ancestral healing journey at lisabonis.com. In 1921, 4 men set off from Scotland to the United States. Will Garrock, his brother Pete, his son Willie, and his nephew Thomas, all coal miners. They left behind the miners' rows and the nationwide mining strike with its soup kitchens. Their destination was Castlegate, Utah, where they had kin to welcome them before sending for their wives and children. They prospered in America, working in one of the finest mines in Utah. Until that tragic day, March 8th, 1924. Disaster struck. 3 explosions, trapping 171 men inside. Rescue crews worked tirelessly for days, but sadly, they could not save a soul. Women were widowed and children were orphaned, and some never recovered from their broken hearts. Castlegate is the true and tragic saga of a Scottish family whose dreams of finding their fortunes in the bountiful coal mines of Castlegate, Utah during the Prohibition era explode in one of the most devastating mine disasters in American history. Learn more at lisabonis.com.